This week on a special two-part episode of No Fear or Favor, we spotlight a bill that seeks to save lives by, in part, increasing penalties for individuals who proliferate illegal firearms to individuals who are prohibited from having them. And we also find out what more can be done to stop gun violence by interviewing a slew of academics, systems actors, and activists and asking two simple questions. One, what gaps are you seeing in the community relative to preventing gun violence? And two, how can the state legislature step in to help solve that?
Hello, I'm Jamel Lundy, the Intergovernmental Relations Manager for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, fancy word for lobbyists. I served in Minnesota House of Representatives for almost 10 years. Hennepin County is the largest county in the state of Minnesota, and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office handles almost half of the state's criminal prosecutions. Follow me as I follow the action at the Capitol with No Fear or Favor. Today, on No Fear or Favor special two-part series on eliminating gun violence, we will not be coming to you from the Capitol or Hennepin County Government Center. Instead, we'll be coming to you from right here in North Minneapolis, community marred by gun violence and a community I call home. Following the murder of 3 first responders in Burnsville, the Minnesota House Public Safety Committee heard House File 2609, brought by Representative Byrd. This bill seeks to better regulate automatic weapons and increases the penalty on individuals who provide weapons to felons who are prohibited from obtaining them.
House File 2609, as amended, does the following. It makes the Minnesota straw purchase law effective by requiring that the purchaser know or reasonably should know that the transferee is a prohibited person. This makes the standard consistent with federal law. In addition, it closes a loophole in current law that only prohibits straw purchasing for certain types of firearms. Our bill will prohibit straw purchasing for all firearms. The bill also moves the crime of straw purchasing from a gross misdemeanor to a felony. The bill requires the BCA to do a report on gun trafficking, and third, the bill bans binary triggers on guns. This bill is one more step we can take in addition to other actions taken by this committee to keep our families and law enforcement safe from gun violence.
Part of the reason why we're supporting this legislation is because it incorporates recommendations that our office has been lobbying for long before Burnsville. We spent the summer talking to prosecutors, law enforcement, academics, and community activists about what approaches they would recommend in order to fill the gaps that we're seeing in preventing gun violence. We took their recommendations and put them into a bill, House File 4277. This episode is less about the important work the legislature is doing that we very much support. This episode is about the work that remains. So what we did was interview experts from all across the system and academia to ask them what gaps in preventing gun violence are they seeing and what can the legislature do to help prevent gun violence community like the one I'm in right now.
And at the moment, the Minnesota legislature is actually trying to tackle the questions around theft and straw purchases, and in many ways should be applauded for that. Where we're not doing enough on that issue is around gun trafficking. There needs to be a concerted effort to tackle the steady flow of firearms into our communities. These are complex investigations. They require resources for law enforcement, time, dedication and attention to building complex cases that can then bring down these trafficking networks. Some of the things that we're currently doing may feel like we're doing the right thing. So, for instance, we have a mandatory minimum sentence for possession of a firearm if you're a prohibited person. That might seem like the intuitive right thing to do, but if that law is not being enforced in a way that is consistent or is providing people with the right discretionary tools to divert people away from violence in the future, then it's not actually serving the purpose it was intended for.
So overwhelmingly, particularly in Black and Brown communities, we are seeing violence that erupts as a result of mutual conflict, right? I think historically we've thought about this as a gang problem, but really it is an interpersonal problem that leads to retaliatory violence. And there are ways to interrupt that we could be deploying that we're just underutilizing, and really looking at those who are deepest and closest to the violence as a source of solution in models that work seems to be a really lost opportunity.
I can tell you in law enforcement, I am seeing the lack of resources. I think we can get ahead of this with early prevention, early intervention processes if the right resources, funding comes to investigators, right? I think we can look into some of these gun violent cases that are occurring and say, why did that person even have a gun? We could have gone ahead of it before that violence occurred.
You have so much with distrust with law enforcement right now, and it's going to take people from the community that's out here doing this work to try to be more proactive with it instead of reactive.
I always look at things through a victim-centered lens. There are huge gaps for victims of gun violence. General crime is funded the least out of all of the other crimes, and I'm not saying that those crimes get too much money. I'm just saying that there isn't enough money for any crime victims, but especially for victims of gun violence. There isn't enough programming like advocacy available for them, especially with gun violence. This trauma will go on and it will take a long time to heal. And depending on the circumstances surrounding the incident of victimization, domestic violence relationship, there are so many nuances that need to be addressed. Victims of gun violence need support and access to resources, both financial resources and mental health, advocacy through the legal process, all of that. And that's what a trained advocate can do.
First and foremost, gun violence is one of the major issues that impact our community and impact the work we do in the Adult Violent Prosecution Division. Another one of the big gaps that we see currently with the laws that are on the books, the quote unquote straw purchaser, the person that's going out, maybe getting them to skirt the law because someone's prohibited, or maybe someone that's actually doing that to profit themselves for disseminating these guns within the community. Right now, within prosecution and law enforcement, the target and the cases that we see every day are those people that were prohibited from having those guns, and those were recovered in potentially search warrants, car stops, etc. But we don't get to the root of the problem. We're not seeing how these people are able to procure the guns or who's facilitating that. Those are cases that we almost never see in this office. And it is very troubling because, as with any type of crime and with any type of societal issue, it's very analogous with drug dealing, right? In drug dealing, you could either go after the person that is in possession of a little bit of it, the user that's having the thing, or you can focus your enforcement on those that are proliferating the drugs within our community. The same is true for firearms.
One of the big gaps that we're seeing is that so many of the gun violence prevention policies that have been passed are reactive and they're carceral. And what we know is that someone who goes to prison for committing a gun crime is almost twice as likely as other types of crime to recidivate. So what we know is that these approaches, these carceral and reactive approaches, really aren't being effective in reducing gun violence or helping someone go on to not commit another act of gun violence.
What we heard today from across the board is our system's far too reactive. We wait till either a felon gets a gun or a shooting takes place, and then we pour resources into a solution. We also heard that we're not coordinating well enough, that law enforcement, prosecutors, and community outreach workers aren't working in closely knit enough structures. We also heard there aren't enough resources that are permanently available for outreach workers to prevent gun violence. We do not have enough resources to fund victim services professionals. We do not fund law enforcement investigations of gun trafficking and straw purchasing. What we've also heard is that there are questions around whether the statutes around felony gun possessions incentivize this reactive approach, and that we should probably study that. Now that we've finished talking about the problems that we're seeing, next week we'll spend an entire episode talking about some of the tangible solutions that legislators can take to curb gun violence in communities like North Minneapolis. This has been Jamel Lundy from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office signing off for No Fear or Favor.